Don't move your 401k to Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard just yet. Hello, Diamond NestEgg members, Super Savers, and course fans. I hope you're healthy and well. Marcus and I, we have a few friends retiring early this year, and we're not sure whether we should be a bit envious or not. But it seems, based on emails that we've received from some of you lately, that early retirement is also top of mind for our community this year, with one of the most frequently asked questions being, do I really need to wait until 59 and a half to pull money out of my 401k or IRA penalty-free? So, with that in mind, here are the 3 topics that we'll be covering in today's video. 1. How can you withdraw funds from your 401k plan before age 59 and a half without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty? 2. What about your IRA or early retirement before 55? 3. What are some important factors to consider when withdrawing early? And please do note that we'll be talking primarily about traditional 401ks and IRAs for most of this video, although I will touch briefly upon Roth accounts towards the end. Let's dive in now, folks. How can you withdraw funds from your 401k plan before age 59 and a half without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty? As our regulars know, when you put pre-tax money in a 401k or 403b to let it grow tax-free, you mostly lock it up until retirement, or at least until you turn 59 and a half, because any early withdrawal before you turn 59 and a half means that you will have to pay an extra 10% penalty. However, there is one exception for people who leave their job in the year they turn 55 or later, whether that may be via retiring, quitting, or being laid off, and it's known as the Rule of 55. This IRS rule applies to employer-sponsored retirement plans that are funded with pre-tax dollars, such as 401ks for private sector employees and 403b plans for public school employees. Here are 5 key points to note about the Rule of 55. Point number 1, you need to turn 55 or older in the year that you retire, quit, or are laid off from your current employer. So if you retire, quit, or are laid off in the year that you turn 53 or 54, the rule will generally not work for you. However, there is an exception for police officers, firefighters, EMTs, air traffic controllers, and other public safety employees. If this is you, you may be able to use the Rule of 55 from the calendar year in which you turn 50. Point number 2, it only applies to 401k or 403b accounts from your current employer. It does not apply to old 401ks or 403bs unless you roll them into your current employer's plan before you leave your job. It also does not apply to Roth plans or individual IRAs, but more on these in the next sections of this video. Point number 3, you will still have to pay your normal income taxes on any withdrawals you make. The Rule of 55 only removes the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty if you meet these other 2 conditions, but not the other tax obligations you may owe to the IRS. Here's an example of how the Rule of 55 would work. Let's take our member Joe, not his real name and not what he looks like, but let's just use our imagination. Joe has $1 million in his current employer's 401k. In March 2025, Joe leaves his job. Maybe he retired, maybe he quit, or maybe he was laid off. It doesn't matter. What matters is that in August 2025, Joe turns 55 and is considering early retirement. Because Joe separated from his employer in the same calendar year that he turns 55, he can start taking penalty-free withdrawals from his $1 million 401k immediately, even though he's not yet 59 and a half. If he needs $50,000 a year to cover living expenses until Social Security kicks in, he can take out that amount each year without the penalty. Now, don't forget, Joe will still have to pay income taxes on those withdrawals, but that's still a much smaller hit than if he had to add the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty on top. And the good news for Joe is that if he gets bored with retirement after a few years and decides to return to work part-time, say at age 57 or 58, he can still continue taking distributions from his old plan as long as it was the same 401k he was contributing to when he separated from his job at age 55. and he has not rolled it over into another plan or IRA, bringing us to point number 4. If you roll your 401k over to an IRA at Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, or any other broker, the rule of 55 no longer applies because IRAs are not covered under the rule of 55. Some 401k plans may also get automatically rolled over to an IRA when your 401k balance drops below a certain level. So this is something to ask your plan administrator about beforehand because again, once your 401k is rolled over to an IRA, even if not by you, the rule of 55 will not apply anymore, and any early withdrawals will no longer be penalty-free. Point number 5. Not all 401k plans allow partial withdrawals before 59.5, even when they would be penalty-free under the rule of 55. So be sure to check your plan's rules first. So that was the rule of 55 for 401ks. But what if you're not 55 or older in the calendar year that you retire, quit, or are laid off? Or what if you don't have a 401k? Well, that brings us nicely to the next section of today's video. What about your IRA or early retirement before 55? As I said before, if you're younger than 55, or if an IRA is where your retirement savings are, the rule of 55 does not apply. However, there may be another way to access your retirement savings early, and that's where IRS Rule 72T and SEP come in. SEP stands for Substantially Equal Periodic Payments. The Rule of 72T allows you to take early withdrawals before 59.5 without incurring the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty, regardless of your age, as long as you follow an IRS-approved method to pay yourself in substantially equal periodic payments, or SEP. And unlike the rule of 55, SEP applies to both IRAs and 401ks. But for 401k, you must already have separated from your employer. Here's how SEP works. Step 1. You need to calculate your annual withdrawal amount using one of 3 IRS-approved methods: the fixed amortization method, the fixed annuitization method, or the required minimum distribution method, or RMD. More on this shortly. Step 2. You withdraw the total calculated amount from your retirement account for that year at the frequency of your choosing: annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly. Step 3. You continue taking payments for at least 5 years, or until you turn 59.5, whichever is longer. Ending early or changing the IRS-approved method for calculating your annual withdrawal amount will trigger retroactive 10% early withdrawal penalties, including interest on all prior withdrawals. If you choose either the fixed amortization or fixed annuitization method, you can make a one-time switch to the RMD method. So, how do you calculate the annual withdrawal amount under SEP, right? Let's start first with the fixed amortization method, because that's probably the most intuitive. And let's assume that you're 50 years old with $1 million in your IRA. If you set up your SEP plan using the fixed amortization method, you would have to define a fixed annual withdrawal amount, which you would then have to take every year for 9.5 years until you turn 59.5. Do note that your fixed annual withdrawal amount is based on an IRS formula, life expectancy factor, and interest rate threshold. I'll save the deeper dive into the actual calculations for another video another day, if there's enough interest, as the actual calculations can get fairly complex. So let's say that your fixed withdrawal amount is $60,000 per year under the fixed amortization method. This would give you a predictable income to work with in your budget, and while you would still have to pay ordinary income taxes on this $60,000 per year, you could avoid the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty for as long as you stick to the plan. The second allowed method is the fixed annuitization method. It's similar to the fixed amortization in that it defines a certain annual withdrawal amount that stays fixed for however long you use SEP under Rule 72T. Under the fixed annuitization method, you calculate your annual amount using your account balance, as well as an interest rate and an annuity factor that's based on IRS guidance. This annuity factor is from an IRS-approved mortality table and basically simulates the payout you'd get if you bought an annuity for yourself. And the third allowed method is the required minimum distribution, or RMD method. Under this method, the annual withdrawal amount will vary because you calculate this amount every year based on your latest account balance and a life expectancy factor from an IRS table. This means that when markets are up, your annual withdrawal amount goes up, and when markets are down, your annual withdrawal amount goes down. And if the markets don't move much, or you have a portfolio that's not very sensitive to markets, then your changing age factor, as well as the size and speed of your own withdrawals, will largely determine how much in RMDs you will have to take every year. For the RMD method, the advantage is that the market-based adjustments to your nest egg mean that you run it down slower in bad markets. The disadvantage is that the variation in annual withdrawal amounts year over year makes planning and budgeting somewhat harder. Plus, once you select this calculation method, no changes are allowed. You cannot switch to one of the other two fixed methods. For the fixed amortization method and the fixed annuitization method, the advantage is the predictability in annual income, since payments stay the same every year, making planning and budgeting a bit easier. And on the flip side, the disadvantage is that your annual withdrawal amounts do not adjust downwards if markets go down, which could deplete your retirement savings faster, unlike with the RMD method. So again, once your annual withdrawal amount is set under these two fixed methods, you can't change that amount for as long as your SEP plan is in place under Rule 72T in order to avoid the 10% penalty. As I mentioned earlier, the only exception is that a one-time switch to the RMD method is allowed for this precise reason, so that you can take out less in bad times and not run down your nest egg as quickly. And to repeat, once you make this one-time switch to the RMD method, though, you cannot switch back to either of the fixed methods. Do keep in mind that none of the three methods allow you to take personal circumstances into account. If you suddenly need more than your calculated annual withdrawal amount, you would not be able to withdraw more without breaking your SEP plan and incurring fines. And if you were to stop taking your annual payments early, you'd similarly trigger the retroactive 10% early withdrawal penalties, plus interest on all prior withdrawals. And in terms of how much your annual withdrawal amount will be in the first year, it will typically be the lowest with the RMD method under normal circumstances, and the highest under the fixed amortization method. In some instances, depending on your age at early withdrawal, among other factors, the fixed amortization method can yield an annual withdrawal amount in the first year that is twice as high as the RMD method. And the fixed annuitization method is usually slightly lower than the fixed amortization method when it comes to the annual withdrawal amount in the first year, because it is generally more conservative. As I mentioned earlier, the actual calculation across the three IRS-approved methods can get fairly complex. And my general recommendation here is to consult with your trusted advisor to make sure you check all the right boxes and that your calculations are correct, because there are a lot of moving pieces here, and one wrong move could trigger retroactive 10% early withdrawal penalties, including interest on all prior withdrawals. So, with that in mind, let's move on now to the next section of today's video. What are some important factors to consider when withdrawing early? So, as I just mentioned, there are a lot of moving pieces when it comes to penalty-free early withdrawals from your retirement savings. So here's a recap of the Rule of 55 versus SEP. In this column, we have the key feature of both early withdrawal methods. In this column, we'll focus on the Rule of 55. And in this column, we'll focus on SEP under Rule 72T. With the Rule of 55, the minimum age is 55. You must be separated from your employer in the calendar year that you turn 55. It only applies to the 401k or 403b plan of the employer that you're separating from, and you can withdraw what you want when you want. So it's pretty flexible in this respect. There's no additional commitment under normal circumstances, and the penalty risk is low if you follow all rules properly. In terms of implementation, it's also relatively easy compared to SEP. Again, remember that if you roll your 401k over to an IRA at Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, or any other broker, the Rule of 55 no longer applies because IRAs are not covered under the Rule of 55. and not all 401k plans allow partial withdrawals before 59 and a half, even under the rule of 55. So be sure to check your plan's rules first. With a SEP, you can start at any age. It applies to both IRAs and 401ks. You have to make annual withdrawals using one of the 3 IRS-approved methods, each with their own rules and limitations. You must continue for at least 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer. The penalty risk is high if you don't follow all the rules properly. The extra 10% penalty will be applied retroactively as well. And implementation is complex because once you start, you're locked in. So generally speaking, if you're 55 or older in the calendar year that you're separated from your employer and your money is in that employer's 401k, the rule of 55 will typically be more flexible and easier to implement if permitted under your plan. If you're younger than 55 or your money is mostly in IRAs, SEP might be your only IRS-approved option for penalty-free early withdrawals. In some cases, people use both Rule of 55 for their 401k and SEP for IRA money. As I touched upon earlier, do consult with a trusted advisor if you decide to go down this route, or the Rule of 55. While it's great to have the option to withdraw early from your retirement savings without the 10% penalty, you need to be meticulous about your calculations and record keeping and ensure everything is done properly along the way. The IRS is very strict about early withdrawal rules, and one misstep can cost you thousands in penalties and interest. And 3 final thoughts. 1. If you have a Roth 401k or Roth IRA, consider withdrawing your contributions from those accounts first, because those can always be withdrawn tax-free and penalty-free, regardless of your age and how long the account has been open. 2. Withdrawing your retirement savings early also means that you're giving up on the future growth of that money, which can be substantial. Money in your traditional IRA or 401k grows tax-deferred and even tax-free in your Roth accounts. By withdrawing early, you lose out on years, even decades of compounding, and you could run out of money sooner. So don't do it lightly. 3. Remember that the IRS also allows other penalty-free withdrawals from traditional 401ks and IRAs under very specific circumstances. For example, you may be able to withdraw funds for qualified higher education expenses or for unreimbursed medical expenses exceeding 7.5% of your adjusted gross income, or AGI, without the 10% penalty. Check with your plan provider for more details, or drop a comment below if you're interested in a follow-up video on this. All right, Diamond NestEgg members, super savers, and course fans, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something new. And as always, if you want to learn more about bond investing and building out a bond portfolio while rates are still attractive, then check out this video here on our bond courses, because rates haven't been at these high levels on average in decades. And for those of you who subscribe to Your Financial Journey and who are more interested in rolling over an employer 401k after you leave, rather than withdrawing early from it, check out this recent video here from Ava on how to set up a rollover IRA with Fidelity and the key things to look out for there. I've linked all the details on Ava's video, our bond courses, and our YouTube Super Saver membership below this video for your convenience. And see you again very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.